I woke up alone after the surgery. The nurse was checking my vitals, her expression a mix of pity and hesitation. "Your kids left," she said softly. "They mentioned that the parking rates here were just getting too expensive." A wave of pure heartbreak washed over me, and I started to sob. Suddenly, the door opened, and a tall man in a well-tailored dark suit walked into the room. He walked over, looked at me with immense kindness, and gently took my hand. "Mrs. Davis, you don't remember me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But back in the 3rd grade, you were the one who bought me lunch every single day." He wasn't just a random visitor, he was the owner of the entire hospital network. And what he did next changed the trajectory of my life forever. "I'm so incredibly grateful you're here to listen. Please stay with me until the very end of my story, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story travels." Above my hospital bed, the fluorescent lights hummed with a cold, mechanical buzz that only made the room feel emptier. I blinked slowly, my throat feeling like sandpaper as I tried to focus on the clock hanging on the sterile white wall. It was 3:27 p.m. The anesthesia still blurred the edges of everything, but one reality was sharp and undeniable: the absolute dead silence of the room. My name is Adrienne Davis, and I'm 64 years old. 3 hours ago, I went under for what my cardiologist called a routine procedure to clear a blocked artery. He assured me it was standard, but at my age, any heart surgery carries a heavy weight. I had asked my 3 adult children to be there when I opened my eyes. David, my oldest at 38, promised he'd take the day off from his accounting firm. Sarah, my 35-year-old daughter who was currently between jobs, said she'd bring flowers. Michael, my youngest at 32, rolled his eyes but agreed to swing by after his sales calls. The room smelled of industrial disinfectant and heavy disappointment. Beside the bed, the monitors beeped rhythmically, tracking my heart rate, blood pressure, and oxygen levels. Everything the doctors needed to know about my physical survival. But no machine could measure the hollow ache spreading through my chest, an ache that had absolutely nothing to do with the surgery. I turned my head toward the window, wincing as the IV line tugged at my neck. Outside, the Seattle sky was a familiar, heavy gray, threatening rain that never seemed to fall. Down below, cars cycled through the hospital parking lot. People were going about their days, visiting the people they loved. "Are you looking for your family, Mrs. Davis?" A voice broke through my foggy, rising panic. I turned to see a young nurse with kind eyes and strawberry blonde hair pulled into a ponytail. Her scrubs were covered in a cheerful cartoon pattern that felt almost absurdly optimistic in such a sterile place. "Yes," I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. My throat was still raw from the breathing tube. She stepped closer to the bed with a gentle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How are you feeling? Any pain? Nausea?" I gave a slight shake of my head. "Where are they? My children? Did they leave a note?" The nurse's smile faltered. She glanced down at her tablet, then back at me, a clear look of discomfort on her face. "Well, they were in the waiting room while you were in surgery, but then—" She hesitated. In that brief silence, the heart monitor beside me began to beep just a little faster. "The gentleman at the front desk said they left about an hour ago." She paused again, clearly struggling with how to break the news. "Just tell me," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength even as my hands began to tremble. He said, "They mentioned the parking rates were getting too expensive, so they'd just come by and check on you later." The words hit me like a physical blow. The parking was too expensive. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" The nurse's cheeks flushed a soft pink. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Davis. I probably shouldn't have... I'm sure they'll be back soon. People get overwhelmed, you know? They go out to get some air, grab a bite to eat." Her voice trailed off because we both knew she was making excuses for something entirely inexcusable. My children, the 3 people I had raised, loved, and sacrificed decades of my life for, had abandoned me right after heart surgery because they didn't want to pay a parking fee. Tears welled up without warning. It wasn't a quiet, dignified cry. It was a deep, chest-heaving sob. It was the sound of complete heartbreak. The nurse reached for a box of tissues on the nightstand, her face a mix of sympathy and awkwardness. "Mrs. Davis, please try to stay calm. Your heart needs rest right now. Is there someone else I can call for you? Another family member or a friend?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't stop the tears. I couldn't process the reality that I was 64 years old, lying in a hospital bed, abandoned over a $20 parking tab. Through the blur of my tears, I heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. They were firm, confident strides that stopped right at my doorway. The nurse looked up, her posture instantly shifting into professional alertness. "Excuse me," a deep, gentle voice said. "Is this the room for Mrs. Adrienne Davis?" I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, trying to clear my vision. A tall man dressed in an expensive, dark suit stood in the doorway. He looked to be in his early 50s, with silver-streaked hair and wire-rimmed glasses that framed very gentle eyes. Everything about him, from his tailored jacket to the leather briefcase in his hand, radiated success and authority. The nurse stood up straight. "Yes, it is, but visiting hours are currently—" "It's all right," he said quietly, stepping into the room. His presence somehow filled the space without being overwhelming. "Mrs. Davis, my name is Malcolm Chen. You don't remember me, but—" He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "Back in the 3rd grade, you were the one who bought me lunch every single day." I stared at him, my confusion breaking through the heavy emotional fog. 3rd grade? That would have been when I was 16 years old, working as a teacher's assistant at Franklin Elementary to earn extra money for my family. But looking at him, I couldn't find a single familiar feature. He seemed to understand my confusion. He walked closer to the bedside, clasping his hands respectfully in front of him. "Mrs. Davis, you probably helped so many children over the years that you can't possibly remember them all, but I remember you. You changed my life." The nurse looked between us, shifting her weight. "Sir, if you aren't immediate family, I really have to ask—" Malcolm turned to her, his voice shifting to a tone that was authoritative yet completely polite. "I own this hospital." My tears stopped instantly. I blinked, convinced the anesthesia was making me hallucinate. "You... what?" The nurse's eyes went wide. Mumbling a quick excuse about checking on another patient, she practically backed out of the room. Malcolm watched her leave, then turned back to me with a faint, bittersweet smile. "May I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the chair beside my bed. I nodded, unable to find my voice. He sat down carefully, placing his briefcase on the floor. For a long moment, he just looked at me with those gentle eyes, which now felt faintly familiar, even if I couldn't map them onto the face of a child from decades ago. "I've been looking for you for years," he said softly. "Ever since I finished medical school and started building my career, I wanted to find the assistant who made sure a hungry little boy had a meal." The heart monitor accelerated again, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was a strange mix of confusion, hope, and an emotion I couldn't quite name. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Malcolm Chen, I'm so sorry, I just don't remember." "It's completely fine that you don't," he said gently. "I was just one of many kids you looked out for, and back then my name wasn't Malcolm Chen, it was Malcolm Peterson. I was adopted by the Chen family when I was 12. He paused, his hands tightening on his lap. "Mrs. Davis, do you remember a boy who never had money for lunch? A boy who was far too thin, whose clothes never fit right? A boy who always sat alone in the cafeteria watching everyone else eat?" Slowly, like fog burning off a landscape, an image began to form in my mind. A little boy with messy dark hair, huge brown eyes, and a hollow look in his cheeks. His clothes were always a size too big and noticeably worn. When lunch period arrived, he would sit at the end of a long table pretending he wasn't hungry. "Oh my goodness," I breathed, a sharp intake of air catching in my throat. "Malcolm, little Malcolm, you were always so quiet and so thin." "I was starving," he said simply, filling in the blank. "Every single day. My biological parents, well, they aren't part of this story anymore. What matters is that you noticed. You saw a kid who was completely invisible to everyone else, and you stepped in." The memories rushed back clearly now. I had taken that job at Franklin Elementary to help my own parents pay the bills. Even at 16, I knew what it felt like to worry about money and sacrifice for the people you loved. I had noticed Malcolm because he reminded me of myself, trying to be transparent, trying not to be a burden. "You never asked any questions," he continued, his voice rich with gratitude. "You never made me feel like a charity case. You found a way to make sure I had a lunch ticket every single day for 2 straight years." I remembered how I used to slip him extra lunch tokens, telling him the cafeteria had made too much food and needed help finishing it. I remembered how his entire face would light up when I handed him a tray, like I had given him the world. "Malcolm," I said, new tears starting to fall. "You were just a baby. You were so small." He reached out and gently took my hand. After hours of feeling utterly abandoned, the warmth of human contact made me want to cry all over again. "Mrs. Davis," he said softly. "When I woke up this morning, I had no idea today would be the day I finally got to say thank you. My assistant flagged your name on the surgical schedule, and I had to come see for myself if it was really you." I squeezed his hand back. This incredibly successful man was once the hungry little boy I tried to protect. "I can't believe it. Look at you. You became a doctor. You own a hospital." "Because of you," he said simply. "Because you showed me that there was kindness in the world, and that I mattered enough for someone to care." We sat in silence for a moment, his warm hand holding mine while the steady beeping of the machines recorded the passing seconds. Outside, the Seattle sky was turning dark, but the room felt brighter than it had all day. "Mrs. Davis," Malcolm said carefully, "when I walked in, I noticed you were alone. Is there no family here with you?" The crushing weight of reality came crashing back down. The sheer cruelty of my situation felt even sharper against the backdrop of this unexpected kindness from a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. "My children," I said, my voice cracking. "They left. They said the parking was too expensive." Malcolm's grip on my hand tightened, and a flicker of deep anger crossed his face before he quickly masked it. When he spoke, his voice was perfectly controlled. "I see," he said quietly. "Then it's a good thing I'm here. Because, Mrs. Davis, I made a promise to myself a long time ago. If I ever found the woman who looked out for me when I had absolutely no one, I would make sure she never had to face a difficult moment alone." Malcolm stayed with me right through the evening shift change. For the first time since waking up, the heavy feeling of abandonment started to lift. He insisted the kitchen bring up dinner for both of us, actual quality food, not the standard hospital fare. As we ate, he shared the story of his life, tracing his path from that empty-handed third grader to the man sitting beside my bed. "After the Chen family adopted me," he said, precisely cutting a piece of salmon, "everything shifted. They provided stability, education, and real care. But I never forgot those 2 years at Franklin Elementary. I never forgot the feeling of hunger, and I never forgot the assistant who made sure I didn't have to experience it." I took a bite of my dinner, still in disbelief. "I only did what anyone should have done." "No," Malcolm said, setting his fork down firmly. "That isn't true, and we both know it. Mrs. Davis, may I call you Adrian?" I nodded, suddenly feeling a bit self-conscious. This highly accomplished man was treating me with more respect and care than my own flesh and blood. "Adrian, do you remember how you paid for those lunches?" I wrinkled my forehead, trying to think back. I used my pay from the assistant job. It wasn't much, but it was $3 a day," he said quietly. "That's what school lunch cost back in 1975. You were making about $200 a month as a part-time assistant. Do you know what $3 a day adds up to?" I shook my head, though an uncomfortable realization was beginning to stir. "It means you spent nearly half your paycheck to feed me. A child you barely knew, a child his own parents didn't care enough to feed." The memory hit me with full force. I had forgotten, or maybe I had forced myself to forget, just how tight money had been back then. I was only 16, trying to help my family keep a roof over our heads. And yes, I had spent a massive chunk of my tiny income on lunch for a boy who reminded me of myself. I had lived on peanut butter sandwiches for 2 years, just so Malcolm could have a hot meal. "I remember," I whispered. "I remember being hungry too, but you were so little, and you looked so utterly helpless." "I was helpless, Adrian, and you looked out for me." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out something that made my breath catch. It was a faded, yellowed paper lunch card from Franklin Elementary, the kind where the cafeteria worker punched a hole for every meal. The edges were incredibly worn, softened from decades of being held. "I kept this," he said, holding it with immense care. "All these years. It was the very last lunch card you gave me before the school year ended. And before the last time I saw him." I reached out with a trembling hand to touch the card, remembering the texture, the faint smell of the industrial cafeteria. "Why? Why did you keep it?" "Because it represented hope," he said simply. "When the world felt completely dark, and I felt like no one would care if I disappeared, I would look at this card. It reminded me that someone had actually seen me. Someone thought I was worth saving." Tears threatened to spill over again, but this time they felt different, almost cleansing. "Malcolm, I had no idea. I just saw a hungry child and you acted without hesitation, expecting absolutely nothing in return." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know where I took that lesson?" I shook my head. "I became a doctor because I wanted to protect people the way you protected me. I specialized in pediatrics, then moved into hospital administration so I could make a difference on a larger scale. Every single business decision I make, every policy I implement in the hospitals I run, is guided by one question. What would Adrian do?" The weight of his words settled deep into my soul. This incredibly successful man, the owner of a massive hospital network, had lived his life under my influence for decades. While I was struggling to raise my own children, working multiple jobs just to survive, that simple act of kindness had grown into something grander than I could have ever imagined. "I built my first clinic in an underserved neighborhood," Malcolm continued. "We put a free lunch program in place for children from struggling families. Then I expanded into full medical services. Today, I own 4 hospitals across the Pacific Northwest, and every single one of them has a program to ensure no child goes hungry while receiving care." I looked at him in absolute awe. "All because of a school lunch?" "Because of you," he corrected gently. "Because you taught a little boy that even when the world is cruel, kindness survives." We sat in a comfortable silence as the evening sounds of the hospital settled around us. Down the hall, a baby cried. An elevator chimed softly. It was the normal background noise of life moving forward. People being taken care of. "Malcolm," I finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "How did you find me? I mean, today. After all these years, how did you know I was here?" His expression turned a bit more serious. "For the past 15 years, I've kept a standing request with a couple of private locator services. Anytime an Adrian Davis of the right age appeared in public records in the Pacific Northwest, I was notified. When you checked in here for surgery, it triggered an alert. You've been looking for me for 15 years? Longer, actually, but I've only had the resources to do a real comprehensive search for the last 15. He paused, studying my face carefully. "Adrian, I know this might sound invasive, but I've learned a great deal about your life. I wanted to be absolutely certain I had the right person before I approached you." A faint chill ran down my spine. "What did you learn?" The muscle in Malcolm's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "I know that you've had an incredibly hard road. 3 children, a divorce when they were very young. You worked multiple jobs to keep them fed and clothed, cleaning offices at night, substituting during the day, working grocery shifts on weekends. Every detail felt like a tiny punch to my chest. My life, laid out so simply, so starkly. The decades of exhaustion and struggle, summarized in just a few sentences. I know that since you retired, you've been living on a fixed income," he continued, his voice soft but his eyes turning harder. "Social Security and a small pension from the school district. It comes out to about $1,200 a month." I nodded, feeling a sudden wave of embarrassment. "It's not much, but it covers my small apartment and my necessities. It's tight, but it's enough. And I also know," Malcolm said, dropping his voice a register, "that despite having so little, you have spent years keeping your children afloat financially. David's accounting firm almost went under 5 years ago, and you took out a loan against your pension to bail him out. Sarah's credit card debt from her 8 months of unemployment, you've been paying the minimums on that. Michael's down payment on his car last year, that was your money." My face burned with shame. How could he know all of this? Why did hearing it out loud make it feel so incredibly tragic? How could you possibly... "Financial records leave a very clear trail when you know what to look for," he said, his tone completely devoid of judgment. "Adrian, I'm not judging you. I understand the instinct to protect your children, but I also learned something else." The way he said it made my stomach twist into a tight knot. "What else?" Malcolm was silent for a long moment, clearly choosing his words with immense care. When he spoke, his voice was measured and restrained. "I know that in the 6 months leading up to today, not one of your children has come to visit you. I know that when you had chest pains last month and called David, he never called back. I know that Sarah hasn't spoken to you since she borrowed $2,000 from you last December." Each fact felt like a precise, painful cut. I wanted to defend them. I wanted to say they were busy, that they had lives, that I understood, but the words wouldn't come. And I know, Malcolm said, his eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful empathy, that when you called each of them to say you were having surgery today, you had to leave messages. They didn't call back until this morning. The tears came again, but they felt different this time. It wasn't just sadness, it was a bone-deep exhaustion, a painful acknowledgement of a truth I had been running from for years. They're busy, I whispered, the same excuse I'd used for a decade. They have families of their own, problems of their own. Adrienne, Malcolm said gently, when I was adopted by the Chen family at 12 years old, I made myself a promise. I promised that if I ever had the chance to repay the person who kept me alive, I would. But I also promised that I would never stand by and watch anyone treat another person the way my biological parents treated me. He leaned forward, his focus entirely on me. Since confirming you were the Adrienne Davis I was looking for, I've been observing your children's patterns for months. And what I've seen? He trailed off, clearly hesitant to reveal everything. What I've seen has caused me immense concern. My heart rate was climbing now, the monitor beside the bed delivering a frantic rhythm. What do you mean? Malcolm reached into his briefcase once more, pulling out a thick manila folder. He held it in his hands for a moment, hesitating. Adrienne, I want you to know that everything I'm about to tell you comes from a place of deep concern for your well-being. You saved my life, and I will not sit back and watch people exploit your kindness the way I was once exploited. He opened the folder and I could see documents printed on official legal letterhead. 3 weeks ago, he said carefully, David made an appointment with an elder law attorney. Sarah has been researching assisted living facilities in your area, and Michael has been asking acquaintances about the legal process for declaring someone mentally incompetent. The room felt like it was tilting on its axis. I gripped the bedrail, certain I was going to be sick. That's impossible, I gasped. They wouldn't. They're my children. They love me. Malcolm's face was an expression of pure gentleness, but his words were unyielding. I believe they love you in whatever way they are capable of. But Adrienne, there are things about your children's financial situations and their plans that I think you need to understand. As the seconds ticked by, the folder in Malcolm's hands seemed to grow heavier. I stared at it, a part of me wanting to rip it away and throw it across the room, and another part desperate to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Perhaps I shouldn't be showing you this while you're recovering, Malcolm noted, seeing my distress. The monitor beside my bed was chirping rapidly now, reflecting my spiked heart rate. No, I said firmly, surprised by the strength in my own voice. I need to know. I've been making excuses for them for far too many years, haven't I? Malcolm nodded slowly, then opened the folder. What I'm about to show you wasn't obtained through illegal means. It's either public record or was shared with me by professionals who became deeply uncomfortable with what was being asked of them. He pulled out the first document, a printed email. This is from the elder law attorney David consulted. The attorney was so unsettled by the consultation that she reached out to me through a mutual professional network. I took the paper with a trembling hand. The email was addressed to a Patricia Henry from an elder law firm. My eyes scanned the text, the words blurring together until one paragraph practically jumped off the page. Mr. Davis specifically inquired about the timeline for declaring an aging parent mentally incompetent, focusing heavily on a scenario where the parent is overly generous and making poor financial decisions that impact the family's estate. The words felt like a physical blow. I read the sentence again, hoping I had misunderstood, but the implication was devastatingly clear. David wasn't looking for ways to support a mother dealing with dementia. He was looking for a legal mechanism to control a mother who was giving away money he believed belonged to him. The attorney, Malcolm said softly, was so disturbed by the nature of David's questions that she refused to take him on as a client. That's why she reached out through her network. She wanted someone to know that an older individual might be at risk. I dropped the email, my fingers shaking. What else? Malcolm hesitated, then pulled out a second document. This is a printout of an online conversation Sarah had with a friend. The friend was so upset by what Sarah was saying that she took screenshots, which eventually made their way to me. The messages were from Facebook, a conversation between Sarah and a woman named Jennifer Moss. I recognized the name. Jennifer had been Sarah's college roommate. My eyes landed on Sarah's messages, each one like a dagger to the heart. Sarah, my mom's charity routine is driving me insane. Do you know she gave $500 to some random cause last month? $500? Meanwhile, I'm drowning in credit card debt. She's 64 and acts like she's going to live forever. Doesn't she realize that money is supposed to be for her family? Jen, I swear, if she gives away much more, there won't be anything left when she passes. David thinks we need to do something before she gets too old and starts getting conned by everyone. We're looking into options. There are ways to protect seniors from themselves, if you know what I mean. I couldn't read any further. The paper slipped from my fingers, and Malcolm caught it before it hit the floor. The betrayal was so complete, so total, that I felt entirely numb. This wasn't a stranger talking about a vulnerable old woman. This was my daughter, the girl I had raised and sacrificed for, discussing me like a financial problem that needed to be managed. There is more, Malcolm said quietly, but perhaps— Show me, I said, my voice completely flat and cold. Show me all of it. The next document was even worse. It was a credit report. My credit report. A recent inquiry had been made on it, requested through David's accounting firm. How did he get this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You gave him your social security number and personal info last year when he offered to help you set up online banking, Malcolm said. He's been monitoring your finances without your knowledge. The report detailed everything. My modest savings account of $3,400, my checking account that hovered around $200 most months, the small loan against my pension I had taken out to help David's business, the recurring payments I made to cover Sarah's credit card debt, and there, regular as clockwork, my $50 monthly donation to the local animal shelter. But on the margin of the report, there were handwritten notes in David's neat accountant's print. Unnecessary charitable giving, approximately $600 per year, can be redirected. He's tracking my donations, I whispered. $50 a month to help abandoned animals, and he considers it unnecessary. Malcolm's jaw was clenched tight, a deep, suppressed anger evident in his eyes. There is one final thing, Adrian. This is the hardest part to face. But I believe you need to hear it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, pulling up an audio file. This was recorded yesterday in the hospital parking lot right after they left. It was captured by a security guard here who overheard what they were saying and felt a moral obligation to record it. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the device, but with Malcolm's help I stabilized my grip and pressed play. The recording was slightly muffled by the outdoor wind, but my children's voices were unmistakable. David's voice came through clearly. Look, the surgery went perfectly. She's fine. There's no reason for us to sit around here all day just to pay $20 for parking. Then Sarah's voice. I just feel a little weird leaving her alone right after she wakes up. Michael's voice followed, light with amusement. Come on, she's spent most of her life alone anyway. She won't even notice the difference. David spoke again, his tone completely clinical. The important thing is that we've established a pattern of being the caring, involved children who showed up at the hospital. When the time comes to make decisions about her care, that's what's going to matter. Sarah, when do you think that will be? David, a year or two, maybe sooner if her health declines. The key is to start building the case now. Document her irresponsible spending habits. Collect evidence of her poor decisions. Michael, like giving money away to strangers. David, exactly. The shelter donations, the random acts of kindness she's always doing, we can easily frame that as early-stage cognitive decline, financial confusion. Sarah, but she isn't confused, she's just generous. David, generous with our inheritance. Look, Sarah, that house is worth $300,000. Her savings and pension add up to another $150,000, maybe more. Do you want to watch her give all of that away to every sob story that comes along? Michael, David's right. We need to protect her from her own bad choices and protect our own futures while we're at it. The recording continued for another minute, a cold, business-like discussion about my net worth, calculating my value to the dollar, planning how to take control of my life and decisions. When the audio finally cut off, the silence in the hospital room was absolute. Long after the audio stopped playing, I kept staring at Malcolm's phone. In the span of a single hour, I had discovered that the 3 people I loved most in the world didn't see me as a mother. They saw me as a financial hurdle standing between them and their security. Every act of kindness I had ever shown, every dollar I had given to help someone else, was viewed as a theft from their future wealth. They think I'm losing my mind, I finally said, my voice barely a whisper. They're planning to declare me incompetent because I give $50 a month to an animal shelter. Adrienne, Malcolm said gently, there's one more thing. The reason they left today had absolutely nothing to do with the parking rates. I looked up at him, wondering what could possibly be worse than what I already knew. While you were still in the recovery room, they went to meet with another attorney, a new one, someone much more willing to help them explore their options. Their appointment was for this afternoon. Every piece of the puzzle fell into place. My children hadn't left because of a $20 parking fee. They left because they had a meeting scheduled to talk about how to take over my life. While I was lying unconscious on an operating table, they were sitting in a lawyer's office learning how to legally strip away my autonomy. How long have you known about this? I asked. 3 months ago, when I confirmed you were the Adrienne Davis I was looking for, I started looking into your situation. Initially, I just wanted to learn about your life, to see if there was a way I could quietly repay some of my debt without disrupting your world. He paused, running a hand through his hair. But the more I uncovered about your children's actions, the more concerned I became. The pattern was clear. They were isolating you, monitoring your finances, and setting the stage to take control. Why didn't you contact me sooner? Malcolm's expression turned pained. Because I wasn't sure you'd believe me, and because a part of me hoped I was wrong. I hoped that when you needed them most, like today, they would show their true character by staying beside you. And instead they showed it by leaving. Yes. I leaned back against the pillows, feeling a profound exhaustion that no physical surgery could ever cause. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt like I was mourning 3 people who had never actually existed. The children I thought I had raised, the children I thought loved me, were entirely fictional. The real David, Sarah, and Michael were 3 strangers who viewed me as nothing more than a bank account with an inconvenient conscience attached. Malcolm, I said after a long, heavy silence, what happens now? He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but entirely kind. That depends entirely on what you want to happen. But Adrienne, I want you to know that you are not alone in this. When I made that promise to myself to repay my debt to you, I meant it. What kind of promise? I promised that if I ever found you, I would make sure you were protected and cared for, exactly the way you protected and cared for me. His voice grew stronger, carrying an absolute certainty. Your children might view you as a problem to be managed, but I view you as the woman who saved my life. And I will be damned if I let anyone treat you the way they're planning to. The internal shift was unlike anything I had felt since opening my eyes after surgery. For hours I had been drowning in pain and betrayal, but now a faint glimmer of hope started to break through. What are you planning, Malcolm? I asked. A warm smile crossed his face, and for a split second I could see the grateful little boy from decades ago. Well, he said, reaching back down into his briefcase, it turns out that running a major hospital network comes with a few distinct advantages, and having an exceptional legal team doesn't hurt either. He pulled out another manila folder, this one thick with official legal documents. Adrienne, how would you feel about making a few changes? The kind of changes that will ensure no one ever tries to dictate your life to you again. I looked at the folder, then back up at his kind, resolute face. Outside, the Seattle evening was settling into darkness, but inside, the room felt brighter than it had all day. Tell me everything, I said. Malcolm opened the folder with the precise care of a surgeon handling a delicate instrument. The documents inside looked entirely different from the heartbreaking evidence of my children's betrayal. Adrienne, he began, his tone professional yet deeply warm, what I'm about to propose might feel overwhelming at first, but I want you to know that every detail here has been years in the making. I've been preparing for this conversation from the moment I started searching for you. I shifted slightly in the bed, wincing as the IV line tugged against my arm. What kind of preparation? He pulled out the first document, which looked like a formal contract. 5 years ago, I established an organization called the Adrienne Davis Foundation. It's a fully funded charitable organization dedicated to 2 missions: ensuring children in underserved areas have access to daily meals and protecting vulnerable seniors so they can live out their lives with dignity, security, and respect. I stared at the paperwork, seeing my own name printed across the official letterhead. A wave of surreal shock washed over me. I named it after you with the intention of asking your permission once I finally found you, Malcolm explained quickly. If you had said no, I would have changed the name immediately. But Adrian, this foundation has been actively funding school lunch initiatives across Washington state for 5 years. Because of the inspiration you gave a hungry little boy, we have provided over 10,000 children with daily meals. The weight of his words settled deep into my chest. While I had been struggling to pay my bills and worrying about my children's futures, Malcolm had been shielding thousands of kids from hunger in my name. While my own flesh and blood viewed my charitable nature as a theft of their inheritance, this man had built a legacy of benevolence based entirely on a simple school lunch. "I'm incredibly moved," I whispered, "but how does this connect to my situation right now?" Malcolm's expression turned sharper, more focused. "The foundation holds substantial assets, more than enough to ensure you never have to worry about financial stability again. More importantly, it provides the perfect legal shield against any claims your children might try to make regarding your independence or judgment." He slid another document forward, lines of detailed figures covering the page. "I want to offer you the position of executive director of the foundation, with an annual salary of $125,000. I nearly choked. "Malcolm, that's more than I ever earned in my entire working life." "It's less than you deserve," he said firmly, "but practically speaking, it grants you complete financial independence and absolute legal protection. As an actively employed executive managing a major foundation, no court would ever entertain a petition claiming you lack the capacity to handle your own affairs. Your children's plans will become entirely dead in the water." A sudden wave of dizziness hit me, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the anesthesia. "But Malcolm, I don't know the first thing about running a foundation. I don't have a business degree or any corporate experience. You have the only thing that matters," he countered gently. "You have the heart and the instinct this entire organization was built to honor. You will have a complete staff of professionals to handle the technical logistics, accounting, and administrative paperwork. Your role will be to guide the mission, help choose which programs receive funding, and serve as the moral compass for an organization dedicated to doing good." The irony was beautiful. My children wanted to strip away my freedom because they believed I was too generous, too willing to help others. And here was Malcolm, offering me the keys to an entire foundation designed to do exactly that on a massive scale. "There's more," Malcolm continued, pulling out a separate stack of papers. "I've also taken the liberty of securing a home for you if you choose to accept it." "You, what?" "It's a beautiful single-story home in Sunset Gardens, a private residential community about 20 minutes from here. It's designed specifically for active seniors who value their independence, but want access to premium support services if they ever need them. The property is completely paid for in full. It will belong to you. No mortgage, no rent, no monthly housing costs whatsoever." After a lifetime of barely getting by, the sheer magnitude of his generosity felt overwhelming. "Malcolm, this is just too much. I can't possibly accept all of this." "You can, and you should," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had built a medical empire. "Adrian, let me ask you a question. When you bought those lunches for me all those years ago, did you expect anything in return?" "Of course not." "Then why is it so difficult to believe that I want to look out for you in the exact same way?" I didn't have an answer for him. Perhaps when you spend decades around people who only see you as a resource to be drained, you forget what unconditional kindness looks like. Malcolm tapped a tablet, turning it to show me photos of a charming cottage. It had a beautiful wraparound porch and a perfectly manicured garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "It comes fully furnished, but you can make any changes you like. There's a community center, walking trails, and exceptional dining services available if you don't feel like cooking. It's completely ready for you to move in the moment you're discharged." I studied the pictures, trying to picture myself walking through those rooms. It looked like a dream, a peaceful, secure retirement I had never even permitted myself to imagine. "But what about my current apartment?" "Our team will handle the entire transition," Malcolm said smoothly. "We'll pack up everything you want to keep, manage the donation of anything you don't need, and take care of all the logistics." His voice softened. "Adrian, I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. This is justice. You gave a vulnerable child hope and dignity. Now that child has grown up, and he is going to ensure you have safety and peace of mind." I looked back at the photos, then into Malcolm's sincere eyes. "What about my children? They're going to be furious. They'll claim I've lost my mind, accepting help from someone they consider a stranger. Malcolm's expression hardened slightly. With all due respect, Adrienne, your children's opinions hold no weight when it comes to your life, especially since their primary concern is protecting their future inheritance rather than ensuring your well-being. He was right, and I knew it. But walking away from a lifetime of putting my children's demands first wasn't easy, even after discovering exactly how little they valued me. Can I ask you one more thing? I asked. Anything. Why now? You've been looking for me for years. You could have approached me at any time. Why wait until I was in a hospital bed? Malcolm was silent for a moment, choosing his words with deliberate care. Because I needed to be absolutely certain of the situation. I've been observing from a distance for months, hoping your children would step up. Hoping they would show you the same kindness you once showed me. When they walked out on you today, right after your surgery, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. He leaned in slightly. And frankly, I was worried that if you weren't in a position where you could clearly see the reality of your situation, your pride would cause you to turn down my help. His honesty hit me with full force. He was entirely right. If he had shown up at my apartment 6 months ago with this offer, I would have thanked him politely and refused out of stubborn independence. I would have made excuses for my kids and insisted I was doing perfectly fine on my own. There is one final document, Malcolm said, pulling out the last piece of paper from his folder. This is entirely optional, but I wanted to present it as a path forward. He handed me a document labeled as a last will and testament, already filled out with my personal information. I had my legal team draft this based on what we've documented regarding your assets and your true wishes. You can modify it however you see fit or throw it away entirely, but I thought it might help to see a clear alternative layout. I scanned the pages, amazed by how thoroughly it addressed my values. Instead of leaving my modest assets to the 3 children who were actively plotting against me, this will directed my estate into a scholarship fund for underprivileged children, left the house to a charity supporting single mothers, and provided ironclad medical directives regarding my care if I ever became unable to make decisions for myself. This leaves absolutely nothing to my children, I stated plainly. Correct. Given that they are currently planning to use the legal system to seize control of your assets, removing their financial incentive entirely is the most effective way to protect you. I set the document down and looked at Malcolm. This man had stepped into my life at my absolute lowest point, appearing like an answer to a prayer I hadn't even known how to utter. You've thought of every single detail, haven't you? I tried to, Adrienne. I want you to have real options, not the illusion of a choice while others pull the strings. He paused, his expression open. But I need you to hear me on this. There are no strings attached to any of this. If you choose to reconcile with your children, if you want to leave everything to them, if you prefer to return to your apartment and live simply, whatever you decide, I will support it. Even if you think I'm making a mistake? Even then, because that is exactly what you did for me. You extended a hand without trying to control the outcome. I leaned back against the pillows, completely stunned by the future he was offering. Financial security, a beautiful home, a meaningful role, and total legal protection from my children's schemes. It was everything I had ever wanted but never dared to dream of, offered by a man who owed me nothing but chose to remember everything. Malcolm, I finally said, what if I accept all of this, and my children fight it? What if they claim you're manipulating me or taking advantage of my health? His smile turned sharp and confident. Let them try. I own the facility, I employ the best legal minds in the state, and I possess documented evidence of their own conversations plotting to compromise your independence. More importantly, you will be gainfully employed, housed, and surrounded by professionals who can testify to your complete mental competence and autonomy. He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. This is my personal attorney, Rebecca Martinez. She specializes in elder law and asset protection. She's already familiar with the details of your situation and is prepared to represent you immediately if needed. I took the card, feeling the heavy weight of its quality, a physical symbol of protection I had never experienced before. You really didn't miss a thing. I had 15 years to plan, Malcolm said simply. Adrienne, I know this is a massive amount of information to process right after surgery. You don't have to decide a single thing today, but I want you to know the offer stands whenever you are ready. A gentle knock at the door interrupted us. The young nurse from earlier peeked in, looking apologetic. Mrs. Davis, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are 3 individuals outside who say they are your children. They're asking to come in." The heart monitor immediately began to pace faster. Malcolm noticed, placing a reassuring hand on my arm. "The choice is entirely yours," he whispered. "You can see them now, or I can tell them to return tomorrow when you're feeling stronger." I looked down at the documents scattered across my bed. The foundation contract, the photographs of a beautiful new home, and the will that would secure everything I had worked for against the people who viewed me as a liability. Then I looked at Malcolm, whose presence had turned the worst day of my life into a moment of incredible hope. "Let them come in," I said, surprised by how steady and calm my voice sounded. "It's time to hear what they have to say." But before the nurse went to fetch them, I carefully gathered Malcolm's documents and handed them back to him. "Will you keep these safe for me for a moment?" "Of course." He slid everything back into his briefcase. "Would you like me to leave?" I considered it. A part of me wanted his protection right there in the room, but another part knew I needed to look my children in the eye alone. I needed to see if there was a single shred of genuine remorse or care in their behavior. "Would you mind waiting just outside the door just in case I need you?" Malcolm stood up, smoothing the front of his tailored jacket. "I'll be right outside. If you need anything at all, just call my name." As he reached the doorway, I called out softly, "Malcolm." He turned back. "Thank you for everything. For remembering me, for looking out for me, and for giving me my life back." His smile was incredibly warm. "Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you for showing a hungry little boy that kindness exists. Every good thing in my life started with that lesson." As he stepped out into the hallway, I could hear the approaching voices. David's confident, booming tone, Sarah's nervous laughter, Michael's attempt at a sarcastic joke. My children, having spent their morning huddled with a lawyer figuring out how to strip away their mother's independence, were finally arriving to pay their respects. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling stronger than I had in years. It was time to see exactly what kind of performance they were about to put on. As the voices grew louder outside the door, I felt my pulse quicken, but it had nothing to do with physical weakness. Through the thin hospital walls, David's voice carried that distinct, authoritative edge he had inherited from his father and sharpened through years of running his accounting firm. "I still think we should have stayed this morning," Sarah was saying, her voice laced with that familiar, anxious whine. "What if something had gone wrong?" "Nothing went wrong," David replied curtly. "It was a standard procedure. We confirmed that with the surgeon before we left." Michael's sharp, dismissive chuckle followed. "Come on, Sarah. She's fine. She's always fine. Mom's tough as nails. She'll outlive all of us." Hearing their casual disregard hit me like a physical weight, even after listening to Malcolm's recording. Hearing it live, knowing they were about to walk through that door and put on a show of filial devotion, made it sting in an entirely different way. The door swung open, and my 3 children walked in. David, as always, led the way. He was wearing his best navy suit, the one he saved for high-profile client meetings. The expression on his face was one I knew well, the practiced look of a professional preparing to manage a difficult client. Sarah followed closely behind, clutching a small, cheap arrangement of supermarket flowers that looked like they had been grabbed from the hospital gift shop 5 minutes ago. Michael brought up the rear, already staring down at his phone. "Mom!" Sarah exclaimed with a forced, cheerful lilt, rushing over to the side of the bed. "How are you feeling? We've been worried sick." I looked closely at her face, searching beneath the performance for any genuine sign of distress. Her makeup was immaculate, her hair freshly styled. If she had been too worried to leave the hospital, she certainly found time to touch up her appearance before returning. "I'm all right," I said calmly, accepting the wilting flowers she pushed into my hands. "Thank you for these." David stopped at the foot of the bed, clasping his hands behind his back in a posture of complete control. "We spoke with Dr. Harrison before coming in. He said the surgery was an absolute success, no complications whatsoever." "That's what I understand as well," I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on his. There was an unfamiliar tension around his eyes, a calculating look that told me his mind was already moving toward his next play. Michael finally looked up from his screen, offering a brief moment of attention. "You look good, Mom. I mean, considering you just had heart surgery." "Thank you, Michael. That's comforting to hear." If he caught the dry irony in my voice, he didn't show it. His thumb was already scrolling through messages again, his capacity for family obligation apparently exhausted by a single compliment. "All right," David said, taking the seat Malcolm had just vacated. "We need to talk about a few things. Practical matters." Here it comes, I thought, the real reason for the visit. Sarah sat on the very edge of the second chair, her hands tightly interlaced. We've been thinking, Mom. We're really concerned about you living entirely on your own, especially after today. What about today concerns you? I asked, keeping my tone entirely neutral. David leaned forward slightly. Mom, you're 64. You just had a cardiac procedure. What happens if something occurs while you're alone in that apartment? What if you fall or have another episode? I have my medical alert pendant, I noted, and the neighbors check in on me. Mrs. Henderson is 87, Michael interjected without looking up. What's she going to do if you have an emergency? Call an ambulance and wring her hands? Sarah shot him a sharp glare before turning back to me. What Michael is trying to say is that we think you'd be much more comfortable in a setting where there are professionals on hand, people who are trained to handle medical needs. A cold feeling crept over me, and it had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. They were already laying the groundwork, steering the conversation toward moving me out of my home for my own good. Are you talking about an assisted living facility? I asked directly. Not a nursing home, David said smoothly. An independent living community with support services. A premium environment where you have your own space but also have access to care. I see. I looked from one face to the next. These three people shared my DNA, yet they felt completely like strangers. And have you looked into specific locations? Sarah's cheeks flushed a light pink. We did some preliminary research just to understand what options are available. There are some incredible communities nearby. For active seniors recovering from heart surgery? I countered. Mom, don't get defensive, David said, his professional patience starting to wear thin. We're talking about your safety and your long-term health. As your children, it's our responsibility to ensure you're properly looked after. The word responsibility felt like a joke coming from him. Where was that responsibility this morning when I woke up terrified and alone? Where had it been over the last year when a phone call was a rarity and a visit was even scarcer? I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm not prepared to give up my home or my independence. Michael finally pocketed his phone, looking at me as if I had just said something incredibly foolish. Mom, independence is great when you're young and healthy. But you're not young anymore, and clearly your health is becoming an issue. My health is an issue? I repeated. I had a single blocked artery. It's been resolved. Dr. Harrison expects a full recovery. For now, David said ominously. But cardiovascular issues are progressive, Mom. This is a wake-up call. You need to start thinking realistically about the future. I felt a spark of anger light up in my chest, hot and remarkably clear. What I need to think about is why my children are more focused on managing my future than supporting me in the present. The room went entirely quiet. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, the cheap paper wrapping on the flowers crinkling in the silence. Michael's phone buzzed against his thigh, and for the first time, he didn't immediately check it. David's jaw set into a hard line, his professional composure slipping slightly. That's not fair, Mom, Sarah said finally. We're here now, aren't we? We care about you. You're here now, I agreed. But where were you 4 hours ago when I woke up alone and crying? We explained that, David said stiffly. The parking situation was ridiculous. $20, I cut in. The daily rate is $20. You left your mother alone after heart surgery to save $20. Michael's phone buzzed again, and this time he answered it. Sorry, I have to take this. It's a client. Hey, Bob. He stepped out into the hallway, already deep into a discussion about a sales listing. Apparently, a potential commission took precedence over his mother's recovery. David watched him leave, clearly annoyed before turning back to me. Mom, you're obviously emotional right now. I understand the surgery was stressful, but you're missing the bigger picture. And what picture is that, David? Your financial situation, he said bluntly. Do you know what this procedure costs? Do you know what follow-up cardiac care runs, even with insurance? You can't afford to maintain an independent household while paying for the medical support you're going to need moving forward. There it was. The real concern laid bare. It wasn't about my health or my safety. It was about the cost, and how my medical care might impact the assets they were so eager to protect. I see, I said quietly, and I assume you've already figured out a solution to this financial problem? Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide. Actually, we have. If you transition to a community, you can sell the house. That capital would easily fund your care for several years, especially if we select a reasonably priced facility. And once that capital is depleted, David added, you transition to state assistance. The program takes over the cost, but by then you're already established in a care routine. I stared at them, amazed by how thoroughly they had mapped out the liquidation of my life. Sell my home, deplete my assets, and then become a ward of the state. Everything neatly settled. And, as a convenient side effect, it would protect their immediate interests from being spent on my actual survival. Have you discussed this with anyone else? I asked. Consulted any professionals to help guide these decisions? David's eyes flickered, a barely noticeable tell. We've done our homework, spoken with people who understand the legalities of elder care. I see. Anyone specific I should know about? Sarah looked confused by the question, but David's posture became slightly more defensive. Just preliminary consultations, Mom. Nothing formal yet. A polite knock at the door cut the conversation short, and Malcolm stepped back into the room. His presence instantly altered the dynamic of the space. He still carried himself with that undeniable aura of wealth and authority, but his demeanor was entirely formal now. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Mrs. Davis, I wanted to check in on you one last time before heading out for the evening." David immediately stood up, his professional instincts sharp enough to recognize the immense wealth radiating from the man in the tailored suit. "I'm sorry, are you my mother's attending physician?" Malcolm offered a polite, distant smile, the kind he reserved for business meetings, entirely different from the warmth he had shown me earlier. "No, my name is Malcolm Chen. I own this facility." The effect was instantaneous. David's posture shifted from defensive to entirely deferential, his voice smoothing into an obsequious tone. Sarah stood up as if meeting royalty, and even Michael, who had just wandered back into the room with his phone, suddenly looked sharp and attentive. "Mr. Chen," David said, extending a hand. "I'm David Davis, Adrian's son. This is my sister Sarah and my brother Michael. We can't thank you enough for the exceptional care your hospital has provided our mother." Malcolm shook each of their hands with a neutral, polite nod. "Your mother receives the exact same standard of excellence we provide to every patient here, though I must say, she is a remarkable woman." "Oh, absolutely," Sarah chimed in, her voice entirely different now. "Our mother has always been incredibly special to us. We're so grateful she's in such good hands." I watched the performance with a mixture of disgust and dark amusement. These were the same children who had abandoned me hours ago, the same children who had spent their morning consulting a lawyer about stripping away my legal rights. Yet the moment a man of immense wealth and power entered the room, they transformed into devoted, grieving heirs. "Mr. Chen," David said, stepping into his professional networking persona, "if you have a brief moment, we were actually discussing our mother's long-term care arrangement. We're trying to make some important decisions regarding her living situation moving forward." Malcolm's expression remained perfectly controlled, but I saw the slight tightening around his eyes. "What kind of decisions?" "Well, given her age and this recent cardiac event, we're concerned about her living independently. We're exploring some assisted living options for her safety." "I see," Malcolm said, his tone entirely even. "And what are Mrs. Davis's thoughts on these options?" David shot a quick glance at me before looking back at Malcolm. "She's a bit resistant to the idea, but we believe it's important to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to her health." "Proactive," Malcolm repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I can appreciate the value of that." He paused, studying them for a moment. "You know, it's interesting. In my experience managing healthcare networks, I've found that patients who maintain complete autonomy over their own care decisions invariably show the highest rates of long-term recovery." Sarah nodded quickly. "Oh, absolutely. We want Mom to feel like she's part of the process." "Of course," Malcolm said smoothly, "though I've also noticed that the priorities of family members can sometimes diverge from the true needs of the patient. It's understandable, of course. Everyone wants what they believe is best." There was a subtle, razor-sharp edge to his words that made David shift his weight uncomfortably. "Well, yes. Sometimes aging parents don't fully grasp the complexities of their own situation." Malcolm nodded slowly. "That can happen. Though I've also found that when individuals are provided with complete financial resources and the right legal support, they remain perfectly capable of managing their own lives." He turned to me, his expression softening into genuine warmth. "Mrs. Davis, how are you feeling about your recovery? Do you feel confident in managing your own path forward?" I met his gaze, understanding exactly what he was offering me in that look. "In fact, Malcolm, I feel stronger and more confident about my future than I have in a very long time." "That is wonderful to hear." Malcolm turned back to my children, his professional smile returning. Well, I will leave you to your visit. Mrs. Davis, if you require anything at all as you transition out of here, please call me directly. Anything. The emphasis on that last word wasn't lost on anyone. David looked thoroughly perplexed, his mind working furiously to figure out why the owner of a major hospital network had taken a personal interest in his mother. Sarah looked unsettled, clearly intimidated by Malcolm's presence, while Michael had already drifted back to his screen. Once Malcolm left, the room felt noticeably emptier. David sat back down, but the confident edge he had started with was entirely gone. That was interesting, he said slowly. I wonder why the owner of the network is personally involved in your case. I shrugged, keeping my expression completely unreadable. Perhaps he simply values hands-on patient care. Perhaps. But David's accountant brain was clearly spinning, trying to identify the piece of information he was missing. Sarah looked entirely overwhelmed by the interaction. He seemed incredibly successful and very powerful. And wealthy, Michael added, finally contributing an accurate assessment. A definitive plan was taking shape in my mind, hardening into absolute certainty with every passing second. I looked at the three of them. David, with his calculations, already wondering how to leverage this new connection. Sarah, always consumed by anxiety over status and money. Michael, completely detached from anything that didn't offer immediate gratification. You know, I said slowly, perhaps your advice about being proactive is correct. All three of them turned back to me, their attention suddenly locked on my bed. I think it's time I start looking seriously at my future, I continued, and making some significant changes while I'm perfectly healthy and capable of making my own choices. David leaned forward, a look of distinct satisfaction crossing his face as he sensed an easy victory. Mom, that's exactly what we've been trying to tell you. Yes, I said, looking past him toward the window. I'm going to make some changes. But the changes coming down the line were entirely different from the ones they were expecting. 6 months later, I stood on the wraparound porch of my new home in Sunset Gardens, watching the morning mist rise off the lake at the center of the community. The cottage Malcolm had shown me in the photos was even more beautiful in reality. Warm, hardwood floors, expansive windows that filled every room with natural light, and a kitchen where I finally had the time and peace to cook for pleasure rather than survival. The transition had been smoother than I ever thought possible. Within a week of my discharge, Malcolm's team handled every single administrative detail of my move. The belongings from my old apartment were packed and delivered, while everything else was handled with complete care. My children had been informed that I was moving to an independent residential community for my long-term health, an explanation that was entirely true, so they never questioned it. What they didn't know was that I wasn't in one of the standard facilities they had researched, but a premium estate. My home was entirely paid for, and my position with the Adrienne Davis Foundation provided a 6-figure salary that removed any trace of financial worry. I took a sip of my morning coffee, a premium roast, a small luxury I could easily afford now, and opened the letter that had arrived the previous afternoon. It was from David, written in his neat, precise hand. Dear Mom, I hope you're settling well into the new place. We haven't heard much from you since the move and wanted to check in. Sarah tried calling last week but went to voicemail. We'd love to come visit soon, see the layout, and make sure you have everything you need. Also, we should probably sit down and review your financial arrangements. I worry about how your fixed income is handling the costs of the new environment. Give me a call when you get this. Love, David. I set the letter down on the table beside my copy of the Seattle Times. It was almost amusing to read his continued concern for my finances. He had absolutely no idea that my income had increased tenfold since our last conversation. My phone rang, breaking the morning quiet. Malcolm's name appeared on the screen, and I smiled as I answered it. Good morning, Malcolm. Good morning, Adrienne. How are you feeling today? Things are going wonderful, I said, meaning it from the bottom of my heart. I just finished reviewing the applications for our new school lunch initiative in Tacoma. I honestly think we should approve all 3 funding requests, even the school with the questionable bookkeeping. I chuckled. Especially that one. Sometimes the places that look the messiest on paper are the ones where the need is most urgent. A very smart little boy taught me that years ago. He showed me that hunger can't wait for perfect circumstances. Malcolm let out a warm laugh over the line. I don't think I'll ever get used to you throwing my own words back at me. All right, let's approve all 3. What else is on your radar today? This afternoon I'm meeting with the architects to look over the blueprints for the new community center, and I have a conference call with the Portland office at 3. Oh, and I still need to grade the scholarship applications for next semester. Sometimes I still catch myself feeling astonished by how full my life is now. For decades, the biggest decisions I faced were figuring out which bill to pay first, or if I could squeeze enough room in the budget to replace a worn-out pair of shoes. Now, the choices I make impact whether thousands of children get a hot meal, or whether dozens of deserving students get to finish college. Sounds like a packed day, Malcolm said. Is it the good kind of busy, or the overwhelming kind? The absolute best kind, I assured him. The kind of busy where you hit the pillow exhausted but completely content. I'm glad to hear that. Before I forget, there's something I should mention. I had an interesting conversation yesterday. Someone contacted my office asking questions about you, specifically regarding your employment with the foundation. My stomach tightened slightly. What kind of questions? Professional ones. They wanted to verify your title, your salary, and curiously enough, your mental competence and ability to perform your duties. I closed my eyes, the answer immediately obvious. David, I assume it was him. My assistant handled it flawlessly. She confirmed that you are a highly valued full-time executive in excellent standing, and that we have absolutely zero concerns regarding your job performance or decision-making abilities. How did David even find out about your office? Probably the same way he noticed your bank balance went up. He's been tracking your financial activity, remember? Of course. David had helped me set up my online banking account, which meant he likely still had access to view the statements. He must have seen the deposits from the foundation and realized his leverage was gone. What happens now? I asked. Absolutely nothing. You are gainfully employed by a registered charity. You live independently and manage your own affairs. No one can legally touch that. A profound sense of relief washed over me. For months, I had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting my children to figure out what was happening and try to interfere. But Malcolm was right. What could they actually do? I was healthier than I had been in years, and financially bulletproof. Actually, Malcolm continued, there's one more thing. Yesterday afternoon, I received a call from an elder law attorney named Patricia Henry. I held my breath. That was the attorney who had initially refused to help David strip away my independence. She wanted to let me know that the client who consulted her 6 months ago has been calling around to other lawyers in the area. He's been asking specific questions about how to challenge an aging parent's financial decisions. More specifically, he's trying to argue that a major salary increase could be framed as a sign of manipulation, or that a new employment contract is proof that a senior is being taken advantage of. Anger flared deep in my chest. Even now, even after I had found happiness, security, and a purpose of my own, David wouldn't let it go. He simply couldn't accept a reality where I made decisions he couldn't control. Malcolm, I said slowly, realistically, can they do anything through the legal system? Not a single thing, he said firmly. You are completely competent. You live entirely on your own terms. You are successfully managing a complex professional career. Any lawyer worth their degree would laugh them out of the office. They're just fishing for a vulnerability that simply isn't there and never will be. I set my coffee cup down and looked out over the water. A family of ducks was gliding across the morning lake. The mother duck led the way, with her ducklings following in a perfect, neat line behind her. It was a picture of pure trust, pure care, and natural protection for the next generation. You know what's funny? I said. For months, I kept waiting to feel guilty about cutting off their financial support. I kept waiting for some wave of maternal instinct to hit me, making me want to bail them out again. But it never happened. For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely free. I am no longer responsible for anyone else's problems, mistakes, or poor choices. How does that feel? Terrifying, I admitted honestly, but absolutely beautiful. Malcolm was quiet for a brief moment. Adrian, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you regret how things ended with them? I thought about it for a long time before answering. I regret that it had to end this way. I regret that they only ever saw me as a financial safety net and a convenient babysitter. I regret spending so many years making excuses for their selfishness. I paused, letting the words settle. But no, I don't regret finally choosing myself. Good, Malcolm said simply, because you deserve to be chosen. You deserved it 40 years ago, and you deserve it right now. After we hung up, I sat on the porch a little longer, reflecting on the journey that brought me to this point. A health scare that led to surgery, an abandonment that led to a revelation, and a betrayal that opened the door to the most unexpected reunion of my life. My phone buzzed in my lap with a text message. For a fleeting second, I wondered if one of my children was finally reaching out to genuinely see how I was recovering, rather than investigating my bank account. But the number was unfamiliar. Mrs. Davis, my name is Jennifer Chen, Malcolm's daughter. I'm a sophomore at the University of Washington, and I'm writing a paper for my sociology class about local charitable organizations. My dad told me all about the foundation and suggested I interview you about its impact on the community. Would you have any time to meet up this week? Thanks, Jenny. A smile spread across my face. The idea of meeting Malcolm's daughter and sharing how a simple act of kindness evolved into an organization that feeds thousands of children and sends hundreds to college brought me immense joy. I quickly typed out a reply. I would love to meet with you, Jenny. How about lunch this Thursday? There's a lovely little cafe right here in Sunset Gardens that I think you'll really enjoy. Her response came back almost instantly. Perfect. I can't wait to hear the stories Dad told me about how you looked out for the kids who needed it most. As I tucked my phone away, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I was building new relationships now, connections rooted in mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection, rather than obligation and guilt. Malcolm had become a true friend, and Jenny would be the first of a new generation I had the privilege to influence. Not through financial bailouts, but through the wisdom of finally understanding my own worth. That afternoon, I had lunch with my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She had quickly become one of my closest companions here. At 82, she was sharp as a tack and fiercely independent, having raised 5 children entirely on her own after her husband passed away early in their marriage. You know what I love about this place, she said, precisely cutting into her salmon. Everyone here chose to be here. We didn't end up here because our children found us inconvenient or because we ran out of options. What do you mean? I mean, we're here because we decided we deserve to live in a beautiful environment, surrounded by people who appreciate who we are. We're here because we finally realized that we matter. Her words struck a deep chord. That was exactly it. I mattered. I wasn't just a resource, a background character existing solely to make other people's lives easier. I was an independent person with my own inherent value. Mrs. Patterson, I said, can I ask you a personal question? Dear, at my age, everything is public domain. Ask away. Do you ever miss your old life, even the difficult parts? She paused, taking a thoughtful sip of her iced tea. I miss the children I thought I had. It took me a long time to realize that the children I thought I was raising and the children I actually raised were 2 entirely different things. How do you tell the difference? She smiled, a warmth in her eyes that carried decades of earned wisdom. It's simple. The children you think you raised will do whatever it takes to ensure you're happy, safe, and fulfilled. The children you actually raised only show up when they need something from you. That evening, I sat in my beautiful living room, surrounded by my favorite books and pieces of art I finally had the confidence to buy for myself. Resting on the coffee table was Malcolm's old paper lunch card, which he had given back to me as a keepsake. It was beautifully framed now, a quiet daily reminder of how far a single moment of kindness can travel through time. I opened my laptop and began to type. Dear David, Sarah, and Michael, thank you for your note and for checking in on me. I want to let you know that I am happier, healthier, and more secure than I have been in years. My new home is wonderful, my finances are completely stable, and I have found deeply meaningful work that brings me joy every single day. I understand that my choices might not align with what you expected or wanted, but they are entirely my own. I do not require any financial assistance, nor am I in any danger of being taken advantage of. I genuinely wish each of you happiness and success in your own lives. Love, Mom. P.S. I've enclosed a brochure about the Adrienne Davis Foundation, just in case you're curious about the work I do. We are always looking for volunteers, should any of you decide you'd like to help feed children who need it. I printed out the letter, signed it deliberately, and sealed it in an envelope along with the foundation pamphlet. I would mail it tomorrow. From this moment on, I was done explaining my life to people who only looked at me and saw an opportunity. As I got ready for bed that night, I stood by my bedroom window, looking out over the illuminated gardens that gave this community its name. Scattered throughout this peaceful place were dozens of people just like me, individuals who discovered late in life what it feels like to be valued for who you are, rather than what you can provide. I thought about Malcolm, the hungry, lonely little boy he used to be, and how feeding him all those years ago had ultimately sustained something vital within myself. It was a sense of purpose that took decades to fully blossom, but it had finally arrived. I thought about all the children who would benefit from the Foundation's programs, and the students who would receive scholarships funded by the very resources I used to spend enabling my own children's poor choices. Most of all, I thought about the woman I had become at 64, autonomous, respected, financially free, and surrounded by people who valued my mind rather than my wallet. A health scare had ironically saved my heart. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. 6 months ago, I woke up from surgery to find myself abandoned by the people I had given everything to. Tonight, I was falling asleep in a home filled with genuine friendship and the profound satisfaction of doing work that truly matters. Kindness has a beautiful way of echoing through the years, and sometimes, if you're fortunate enough, it circles all the way back around to rescue you. Now, I'm curious about your thoughts on this story. If you found yourself in my position, how would you have handled it? Have you ever experienced a turning point like this in your own life? Let me know in the comments below. I've also left 2 of our most compelling stories on the screen right now that I think will completely surprise you. Thank you so much for watching.